What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and Wednesdays isn't really a dedicated comic book day for us. So what we're going to start doing here at Comics Explained is we're going to take all the comic book movie, TV show stuff that we would normally talk about on Geek Culture Explained, and we're going to talk about it here on Comics Explained, because honestly, I'm burning myself out making like 10 to 15 videos a week, to the point that I almost wanted to quit last week. So as a result of that, what I want to do in this video is I want to basically make sense of everything going on with Kang the Conqueror and He Who Remains and the multiverse and all that kind of stuff, because that seems to confuse a lot of the casual moviegoers and TV show fans that are out there. And then I want to put forward a theory of how we're going to see Chris Evans' Captain America again. And actually his involvement here is going to take place during the time when he was basically putting the Infinity Stones back at the end of Avengers Endgame. So let's make sense of all this stuff, right? Let's make sense of all these things. So here's how all this plays out. In the beginning, there was just the multiverse. That was basically it. How it came into existence doesn't really matter. What does matter is that in every single universe across the multiverse, in the 31st century, there was a guy named Nathaniel Richards. That's probably the single most important thing that we're going to talk about here. And the reason why is because in every universe, each one of these Nathaniel Richards realized that their universe was part of the greater multiverse. And so what they ended up doing was exploring the multiverse. They literally met alternate reality versions of each other. But what ended up happening here is some of these versions of Nathaniel Richards realized they could conquer the multiverse, whereas other ones wanted to explore it and be defenders of it. So quite literally, good guys and bad guys. And so what this did is it led to the multiversal war. Literally, all these different versions of Nathaniel facing off against each other. Now, realizing that this war would destroy the entirety of the multiverse, one of these versions of Nathaniel weaponized a cosmic entity and then used that power to obliterate every single universe in the multiverse except for his own. That universe being the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Earth 616, as we call it now. And so following this act of wiping out the multiverse and preserving his own universe, this guy took off to the very end of time, kind of outside of time, and he started calling himself He Who Remains. In turn, he created the Time Variance Authority, and realizing that the return of the multiverse in an unchecked manner, where it's just any number of alternate realities coming into existence out there, that it would basically lead to the return of his evil versions, that what he ended up doing was using the TVA as a means to destroy any alternate reality that did not lead to the creation of him. And so the TVA did this for eons, for who in the hell knows how long. But this goes into the events of Loki, when ultimately Loki and one of his variants, Sylvie, discover He Who Remains. And so when that happened, when they're sitting in that room and they're talking to Jonathan Majors' character, he gave them two options. He said, either you can take over for me and ensure that this sacred timeline, this small number of universes in the multiverse, stays intact, and you don't have to worry about evil versions of Kang showing up, or you can kill me, you can let the multiverse just kind of spiral out to its natural state, and then you got to worry about my variants. And ultimately, Sylvie betrayed Loki and then decided to kill He Who Remains, allowing the multiverse to come back. Now, having said all of that, that's what gets us right here to where we are with basically Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania. There are questions that we do not have answers to. For example, how did this version of Kang the Conqueror get here? Is he the only one? Are there other versions of Kang that exist out there in the multiverse that are part of this giant council of Kangs? Did this version of Kang that we're going to see in Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, did he kill all the other Kangs and he's the only one left? These are things that we don't know. We won't have an answer to this question until we get to this movie, and probably not even until we get to Loki season 2. This will probably answer all those different things. But I do have a bit of a theory on this. I'm not going to go super in-depth into it, but one of the things that we could argue here, or that we could say potentially happened, is that when the multiverse came back, all those different versions of Kang came along with it, but the history's still intact. History's still the same, right? It's a chronological series of events. Multiversal war, He Who Remains ends it, he forms the TVA, he controls the timeline, Sylvie kills He Who Remains, now the multiverse is back. Done. Which means that in any of these alternate realities, a version of Nathaniel Richards, this Kang the Conqueror that we're going to see in Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, he could look over the entire history of the time stream, which includes his own destruction, or how it was that He Who Remains wiped out the multiverse in the first multiversal war. This could give him an idea and say, okay, what if I did that instead? What if I go all the way back to the very beginning of time, to the very beginning of the multiversal war, and instead of He Who Remains using Goliath to basically wipe out the entirety of the multiverse, I do it. I weaponize this cosmic entity and I wipe out all the multiverse except for a collection of universes or for my own universe, and now I'm the one running the show. If this was the case, it would answer a few different questions. For example, at the end of the Loki TV show, one of the things that a lot of people miss is that when Loki's sent back to the TVA headquarters by Sylvie, there's a huge change that goes on there. The first is that we know that instead of the statues of the TVA, that is statues of Kang the Conqueror. That when you have him meeting with Mobius and B-15, they don't know who he is, whereas they previously did. This basically means that Kang the Conqueror has already changed history. He's already changed the timeline. But the bigger hit that this is Kang the Conqueror running the show is that right before Loki gets to Mobius and B-15, when they're talking amongst each other, they're talking about all these different branches coming off of the main timeline, and Mobius is saying things like, does he want it to be this way? Like, why does he want the universes to branch out? That kind of thing. Basically indicating that Mobius knows there's one guy running the show. This is important because in the Loki TV show, before everything was changed, before He Who Remains was killed, Mobius didn't know about He Who Remains. He didn't know about the whole lie of the Timekeepers. Hence the reason why Loki was racing back to Mobius to tell him everything. He wouldn't need to tell him everything if Mobius already knew. So it's that kind of a thing. So the question that we have here is, how exactly would this work? Well, I think it works in the same way of like a meteor crashing into Earth, right? A meteor smashes into Earth, and what you end up getting is like tidal waves just kind of branching out in every direction, right? Like literally just spreading out in every single direction. So we can use that analogy here. We can say that this meteor, whatever event caused it to set on a course where it was going to crash into Earth, that is Sylvie killing He Who Remains. The meteor crashing into Earth is Kang going back in time, weaponizing Alioth or whatever, and then killing the entirety of the multiverse, changing the time stream. The tidal wave is the effect of that action spreading along the time stream. So by the time Loki was pushed back to the TVA headquarters by Sylvie, that tidal wave had already passed over the TVA, and so it was already shifted. It had already changed. Quite literally, if Loki had gotten there at that point in time before the tidal wave hit, you actually probably would have seen that change happening in real time. You would have seen the statues of the TVA being removed and replaced with the statues of Kang. That Mobius suddenly would have been like, who are you, right? Like mid-conversation, okay, Loki, so here's what we're gonna do. Who the hell are you? You know, like literally just like that. Like you would see that shift happen in real time, which honestly, I think they should have done. It would have made everything clearer for the general audience. But having said that, I hope that little bit makes sense right there. I hope it kind of brings clarity to this otherwise confusing situation. Again, there's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. The idea of Kang going into the past and changing everything, we don't definitively know if that's true. We'll probably end up finding out in Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, but we don't have an absolute answer here. Now, one of the things that I've been saying here when it comes to the whole idea of Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars is that this is basically going to be Avengers Forever, right? It'll be done by a different name, and it may include elements of Battleworld, but it's going to be Avengers Forever. This is going to be a series of films that are basically going to focus on bringing together an Avengers team, a multiversal Avengers team that includes members who have been plucked from the time stream. So literally what Marvel could do is say, okay, Captain America is going into the past, he's going to put the Infinity Stones back to where they're supposed to be, but then he's recruited by Loki. Loki's like, hey, Cap, we got a great big huge problem. Kang the Conqueror is back. He's trying to destroy the whole multiverse. We need your help. We're forming a multiversal Avengers team. And let's say that he's met by like Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, maybe like right when he first became Iron Man, as opposed to when he died during the events of Avengers Endgame. Maybe he's met by like a future version of Captain America. I mean, in the trailer, you do see a point where it's basically like a bajillion Ant-Men. So the idea of there being multiple variants of existing heroes that we know that are going to appear over the course of both this movie and possibly future movies, that's not out of the question. I imagine this movie will be confined to Ant-Man and you'll see multiple versions of Scott Lang, but it's literally Marvel easing us into this. That's what they've done. If you look at the bigger picture, it's what they've done here. Avengers Endgame eased us into time travel. Loki and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, as well as Marvel What If, has eased us into the concept of alternate realities and different versions of the same hero across the entirety of the multiverse. Literally, this is just the next logical step. Hey guys, here's an Avengers team with Captain America from this universe, but it's actually Scott Lang instead of Chris Evans, right? That kind of a thing, right? So it's entirely possible they could do that. But having said that, Let me know what you guys think about this, right? Let me know what you guys think about this possibility. But thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.